Hi everyone, it's Lennon. And in this installment of Mindsight 2020, for June, I picked the word joyful essence for this month, back in December. Which, when I opened my notebook and I thought about all the topics that I have researched about, talked about, in the last 6 months, a lot of them have been sitting heavily on my mind lately because this whole exercise for me, this once a month exercise, is about mindfulness, getting in touch with my brain to figure out what the hell's going on in there. And let me tell you something, joy ain't one of them. Now, when you look up the word joy, research would suggest that it is the simple delight in living life. But life doesn't work that way, does it? You don't wake up one day and you're just joyous, I think that when the conscious mind bears down on us, the day-to-day clouds those situations that are high anxiety this, high anxiety that, preventing us from those serotonin and, those neurotransmitters from firing off, clouds it. The way I grew up, I'll say my 18-year-old self was a bitter, cynical person to be so young. I didn't have any friends. Now, I can see why a doctor would say that that's a stressful situation. I don't put myself out there. Never have. And then it got to the point where when I met my partner, the thing that called me to them was their ability to force joy on me. They literally had to shove it down my throat. There were situations when we were going out and dating that they would shove me into a situation that had me belly laughing. Shove me into a situation like, you're gonna do this because I know the outcome. Without even saying that to me, they would shove me in these situations and force me to do things that would step me out of my comfort zone. And it led to uncomfortability in the relationship when it came time to trust this person and to vow things to this person. Then it eventually I was left with, I know you're going to force me to do this, so I might as well do it anyway. That's why I married him. Because I realized no one else would have this ability. Does that mean make me dependent on someone for my joy? Not necessarily. Maybe in some instances. When I turned to a spiritual practice, I started noticing things about my life. Noticing things that were in a lot of the texts and in a lot of the spells and rituals that I wanted to do. The path led down gratitude magic, self-love magic, things like that I had no idea pre-spirituality that I needed those things. It was calling to me like a beacon because I needed those things. I needed to establish some joy within the way that I look, some joy within the fact that I'm grateful for things that are in my life. I'm not constantly trying to be just this ambitious human that's not looking at the things I already have. It took me being with my life partner and me being with I was sitting with this spirituality that basically told me gratitude is necessary, loving myself is necessary in the quest for greatness, in the quest for being a 100%, human being. Those were things that I had no idea were the part of spirituality. So those things awoken parts in me that called to the joyous parts or called to the places in my body that needed joy. I didn't want to get too in depth in my life story. Okay, that's not what the purpose of this was. The purpose of this was to tell you I wasn't happy. There are moments where I have to sit with myself because I can't remember the last time that I laughed until I cried. The last time I laughed until I peed. You know, when I have those thoughts, I immediately go, why has it been a fucking year since I have laughed and peed my pants? That is unacceptable. What are some organic things I can do that shuts my brain down just a minute from the mundane to get to a space of joy within what I have? You know, the cute thing that my kids said that was really, really funny. And the comedian that's playing in the background while I do laundry really kind of have mindfulness going in all directions. And then on top of that, having gratitude to back all that up. I guess my point is that it took me realizing what makes a spiritual practice for me, what turned it all around, was I started noticing things that I started noticing my dependency on other people for my happiness. It was restricting me from finding it myself, within myself. And again, I started making proclamations that this was unacceptable. There are two neurotransmitters in the brain that their levels and things, they're activated during times of joy and happiness, okay? Like when you laugh, serotonin gets pumped into your system. Now, why is that helpful? Why is having serotonin blast your system helpful? First of all, it lowers the stress hormone. When I read that, I was like, okay, so if I'm in high stress, right? Ooh, the stress level's way high, okay? In order to pull that down, I have to do something that would blast that with serotonin. I think within reading all these articles, I'll put them below for you if you want to read them too. I think it's about balance. So you're not the cortisol, okay, which is the stress hormone, way up here all the time. Okay, let's just say you live in a constant state of high anxiety, right? Or stress. And your serotonin is barely doing this. It's not even coming up here. You're really not. So the objective is to keep it all roughly within this range, not this range. And when I read that, I was like, holy shit, okay. So I need to find some actual things I can do for myself as part, like maybe part of my spiritual practice, that will blast my system, my body and my brain and my nervous system, circulatory system with serotonin to balance out the cortisol. And so I've started, like when I journal a lot, I automatic write a lot. And I started noticing my lists are really like short when it comes time to like what I hold space with that makes me joyful. It was eye-opening. I was like, I need to add some shit to this list. Otherwise, nothing's happening. I'm just doing this, not doing this. It's about keeping them balanced. The main thing of serotonin that I wanted to say upon researching was that it's a mood regulator. So when your body and your brain are being blasted with serotonin, you have these feelings of well-being, right? Like peace almost. I think it's like a peace. And it's helping regulate when you're in a high state of stress and you like laugh. Let's just say I fake it till I make it. I'll just blast out a belly laugh when nothing's funny. I'll like I'm telling my brain, okay, she's laughing, something's funny, blast her with some serotonin, right? And then I can start balancing, right? Then I get to a state of peace. And then it kind of pulls the stress level peg down, which is the goal, right? We don't want to stay up here. Now, the second kind of a thing I want to talk about is dopamine. Dopamine is another neurotransmitter, and it affects a whole bunch of things like heart rate, fatigue, the way like your blood vessels. It affects all of that. But what its purpose is, instead of regulating your mood, it is like a stimulant for reward. I talked about this in my last Mindsight video. Rewarding is right up there with joy, right? Think after you eat a good meal, that type of a feeling, or after sex, same type of concept. Always a sigh at the end of that. Those types of rewards that you've accomplished something, that's what dopamine does. So it's sending out rewards to you when you've accomplished something. And along with the serotonin levels, so you've got this sense of well-being here, and then you've got this sense that's like, I'm joyful and I'm grateful for that. I've accomplished my list of shit to do today. So I'm getting a reward from my brain. Having those together will help that high cortisol level, what's way up here, balance those out. And in a lot of the studies I've followed, it says you need both. You don't just need to have this sense of well-being, because life doesn't work that way. When you accomplish things and when you set goals, and when you have, like I do, when I have those written down in journals of what I want to do every day to remain gratuitous and remain joyful, find the little things, what did so-and-so say today that really made me laugh, writing those things down. And it can be a before and after. Like I can write down something in the morning. I've done this before too, but mostly it's in the evening when I have my journal time in the evening. It's about really being mindful of what happened that day, no matter what my levels were. And then guess what? What that does is having those written down, I think about them the next day. So when the next day the same kind of shit happens, I'm like, so-and-so said that yesterday and that was really funny. And that kind of helps. In the middle of that stressful situation, I can blast it with that funny thing. And that's an everyday exercise for me to get me out of the joyless mindset. When I think about cortisol and how if the level is way up here, that right there is automatically blocking the neurotransmitters of dopamine and serotonin. Literally blocking it. And you have to, like I said before, sometimes you have to fake it till you make it. Blast your brain with a good belly laugh out of nowhere, like a fake ass laugh. And then that can kind of help rewire the brain almost. Not all the time, okay? What can I do organically? What can I do organically to bring these levels up? So that I'm not in a constant state of this is an absolutely zero. No matter what my cortisol is that day, what am I going to do? What am I actively doing to raise this from zero? Ooh. Anyway, so that was a joyful June lesson. As the 6th month, I'm 6 months into this, and I'm so happy to keep going and find different things out and be vulnerable on here and tell you some of my life experiences that might have molded the research a little bit. So if you have anything to add, any articles that you want me to read, any books on these subjects like joyfulness, mindfulness, gratitude, even some witchy books that you think I might like when it comes in terms of this, leave them below, because I would love to get your thoughts and your resources that you've read that have helped you. I mean, that's what this is all about. So I really loved the fact that this new moon took place for Mindsight. So there's Mindsight here, yay, on the new moon. But then also it's Litha. I kept thinking while I'm out here sunbathing, I was sunbathing, and I like to do that this time of year anyway, get out and catch some sun rays, but as is Litha, and it's the longest day, I thought, I need to catch some sun rays. But then it got me thinking about the sun. When I really think about Litha, I think about the sun, and I think about the sun card in tarot and what that ultimately means for me. And so what I've done, because in Mindsight, I like to have an activity, right? So I like to have an activity I want to work on and an activity that I can share with you guys. So The activity, and like I said, in the other half of the beginning of this video, I kind of talked about dopamine and serotonin and how I was pretty cynical growing up. I was so, I was like a fairy. I'm not gonna lie. I was like flying about my yard and reading so many fantasy books, and I was just always off. It seemed like I was always off in my own world. Apparently I was off in my own world because I didn't like the world I was living in. And I just remember my childhood being like before 13 years old, being chasing fireflies and trailing in the musk of summer and spring. And then when I started to get out into the world a little bit into my teenagehood, I started noticing that a lot of the people I was meeting were fake. As someone so young coming into the world and noticing the fakeness of people and noticing the unhappiness of most people that were supposed to be living this American dream, it slashed something in me, and I wanted to remain that little fairy, and life doesn't work that way, and that was a slap in the face. So when I started studying the tarot, that was one of the main things that I wanted to study with it, is the little archetypes in the tarot that pull out all those feelings, all those good and bad feelings, and how ultimately I've tied them into my life now. And so, happy Litha. But what I've essentially done here on my outside table, because I've just been outside all day. I'm going to remain out here all day. We're going to grill out tonight. We're going to have a little chimney, a bonfire. So solstice is around my house. I pulled out 6 sun cards from various tarot decks that I love. And I wanted to kind of talk about them and the activity aspect of this, this Mindsight is to pull out some sun cards that you really, really like. And kind of what I've been doing is like meditating on the sun card and what the differences are in them and how joy plays a part in each one. So at first we see this in the Rider-Waite, where we see this baby on the horse, right? And upon first glance, you're like, what in the hell? Is it like childhood? Like, to me, this always resonated with me because I was that fairy in childhood. This reminds me of the joy I felt as a child, the kind of innocent joy, the kind of open and vulnerable joy that we feel as children. And we have to find that in our adult life. We have to find that somehow. Not all the time, because life doesn't work that way, like I said before, but kind of like naming some things that make you happy and make you giddy, almost like this little baby. It's like my least favorite depiction in the sun card of all time, but I really like the fact that in the Marseille and in the Thoth, there's two beings in this card and 2 beings in this. And I love the aspect of the 2, especially in terms of Litha, because as it's the longest day of the year, we're trying to get the balance back. And especially today's Litha, there's an eclipse happening. So we have the longest day of the year, right? But then we're battling the eclipse. So there's like a duality there. And then it's almost like the whole universe is fighting for the balance. I love that sense of coming back to the universal good. What is the universal good? How do we meditate on that as humans? And I love, like I said, when we see cards like this with the 2 figures in them. I'm looking at the other one, the Crowley one. It's like the tension, like both of these figures, how they're holding each other. It feels like there's a tension of the opposites here. And it's almost like they're battling each other for the ultimate good. And it's not about who's winning, and it's not about who's right and who's wrong and who's good and who's bad. Kind of like this, it's about the sun. It's about coming into your own, and both figures battling it out to, it's about getting to the good, not who's right or wrong. And I love that. Also, when it comes to like in terms of the sun card and Litha and the longest day of the year, and I kind of think, I don't follow like a pagan like a Wiccan path, so I don't really follow the Oak King and the Holly King's battle today. But I think about that, when I think about their battle, the Holly King and the Oak King battling it out today, and the Holly King ultimately winning said battle, because we're going into the dark half of the year now, and it's going to be shorter days from now on. And that's what I see in both of these, is maybe some semblance of the Godhead here battling it out in the universe for what's best for the universe. And that's kind of the take I take. I feel like this is everyone in the zoo, right? And this circle of people here, this is just the accumulation of humanity coming together with the animals. And it's not about noticing their differences. It's about noticing how they work together, how they played together, how they are one with each other and one with the universe and the animals. And I feel like this card really, it just means so much to me to have this card depicted like that. And I want to shine light in an authentic way. I think that's another beautiful message of the Sun card, is authenticity and vulnerability. And when you're open, you live like this, not just for yourself, but for the whole, and meditating on that too. For me, it's about focusing on the positive and focusing on the real. And I pulled this out. This is my Greenwood Tarot, even though I'll leave it up in the cards, but I made this myself with make playing cards, and it's like turned into like a mini oracle, and it's lovely. Anyway, this reminds me of what Litha is all about. These plants and this figure, almost like the Fool and the Thoth, just jumping out at you. And it's right here in his heart chakra is where the sun actually looks to be instead of the solar. But right here, that's where it's bursting free. That light is bursting free. And it's about him bursting through his authentic self. And by being his authentic self, will he shine his light. Now in this is the last one. This is the Forest of Enchantment Tarot, which, I don't know, something about this tarot, it just does it for me. It just really does. And I got the sun card from this, called Sunlight. And it's, as you can see, it's Pan. Focus on him. Focus on Pan. He's just playing his little flute, and I think this is just the sexiest thing I've ever seen in my life. I think about the forest. I think about, I've lived close to forests in my life, and the yard that I had growing up, this big magical place that I grew up, had like the back, it was like a half acre full of woods. And I remember going in there in the middle of the day, and it would still be dark, but the dappled sunlight on the canopy, on the forest floor, was the best thing you'll see. How it seems to be cutting out so much light, even in the middle of the day. High noon, in the middle of the forest, the sun still will peek through. It's not completely wiped out. It's not the speckled, dappled sun rays that do poke through leave behind these magical like sunbeams and you can see them off into the distance, these magical sunbeams. And that's what I think about when I think of this, is Pan, first of all. And for me, Pan is about, it's about the vitality. No lie, he reminds me of vitality. And when I get this card in a reading, I think about his flute, and I think about hearing his flute, meditating on flute music, and letting his vitality sink in. Where do I feel the most vital in my own life? So, I didn't want to get too in depth into this back half of this video, but the first half, I really wanted to talk about why I made Joyful June and how, and all that. Like that's really the rub of the video. But then this other vlog part is me coming on and talking about Litha, and how I was so excited to have them kind of all tie in together. Meditating on all these sun cards and what they mean to me, how I can feel the joy in my own life, and how they're different, but what is the core here? What is the core of all of them? And joy is it. So I hope that you're finding some sense of joy today, and every day finding some sense of joy. Just get out your sun cards. Get out a couple of sun cards and notice the differences. Notice the similarities and which one's your favorite. That's what I'll be doing. So, happy solstice. And I'll see you next new moon for some more Mindsight love.